Good morning, Kensington. We're so excited to have you here with us today, whether you're online or you're in the building with us. If you could please stand and sing with us if you're able and worship God together. I've abandoned all I've carried, and I've forsaken the one I was. I found freedom, and I found freedom here at your cross. And hallelujah, a wounded one, King of glory, the sovereign God, Son of heaven, my redemption. I'm alive in you. I've been united in crucifixion, and I've been covered by your blood. Your grace and mercy displayed before me, and I found freedom here at your cross. Hallelujah, wounded one, King of glory, the Son of God, Son of heaven, you're my redemption. Oh, I'm alive in you. When you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. When you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. When you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. Oh, when you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. When you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. When you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. When you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. When you went down into the grave, you got up, now I'm alive in you. of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down and surrendered now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down and surrendered now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. 'Cause all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing the goodness of God.
Oh, woo! What a great song to kick off this morning. You can grab a seat. I love that song. It's such a beautiful reminder of God's goodness and an encouragement to us. And I hope that was an encouraging moment for you this morning. And I'm excited as we jump into our service. My name is Justin, if we haven't met. So glad that you're here. I'm the lead pastor here. I want to welcome you, especially if you're newer or maybe you've been coming throughout the summer. So glad that you've decided to join us today, and whether that's in person or online. Now, I want to give you a few updates that are happening in the upcoming weeks that might be some things for you or your family to get involved in. The first thing is we are very passionate about serving our local community of school partners. We have move-out teams that help with tutoring, support teachers, specifically in the Pontiac region. And so we always in the fall do a back-to-school partner opportunity where you can buy supplies for some of the schools, the teachers, the classrooms to help resource them as they go into the year, and also snacks for them because we know that some of them are in a situation where they're maybe a little bit more under-resourced or don't have the certain foods that are available to them. So we try to help partner with the teachers to have an incredible impact in the year. There's a couple ways to do this. Our family, we have 4 kids. We love to go to the store together, pick out the supplies. I know other people are like, can I just click and be able to have that taken care of? Both options are available to you. You can go onto our website to be able to find out a way to partner with our school partners, and we are so glad for all of your generosity in that opportunity. Another thing I want to let you know about is if you have middle schoolers in the room, one of the things that we have that has been an annual tradition is our soak or dye event. And to be clear, that dye is a color dye event that is really amazing. We do a massive water wars experience with all of our campuses, bus them all to our Troy location. The local fire station comes out. I was blessed to be able to use that fire hose and be able to hose down my own children. It was amazing. That was my favorite serving opportunity I've ever had. But it's a great event for middle schoolers, kind of kicking off the new year and kind of celebrating the end of the summer. Would love for you to sign up for that, get your kid involved in our middle school ministry, and Jackson and the team are hosting this incredible event. Now, I mentioned if you're newer here, one of the things we do on a regular basis is something called our welcome lunch. And we just like inviting people to stay after service, have lunch, connect a little bit. And it's a great space if you're newer to ask questions, or maybe if you haven't found your place here at Kensington and you want to take a next step, you can do that right after the service today. We'll have a welcome lunch right out these doors by our hub. Just hang out with us, connect with us, and we'd love to be able to host you. If you haven't signed up, you are more than invited to join us today. Now, the last thing I want to do is I have a request from you. One of the things that I very much appreciate about our team here at Kensington is we are in a high school where we tear it down and set it up every single week. And this has been a little bit chaotic. I appreciate everyone's kindness as we haven't had a parking lot. Hopefully in a couple weeks we will have a parking lot. I think the school really wants to have a parking lot before school starts. But you've been taking the walk, and it's been an amazing, and we're just grateful for your kindness in the process and your grace. But one of the things that happens as school gets back in is we start to set up and tear down every single week. And so here's my request. I'm looking for 8 people to be willing to serve twice a month. And that's what we're looking for, twice a month, to help out in the morning, helping set up the auditorium, the kids' classroom, so that everyone has an incredible experience. After the service, I'd love it if you're interested or willing. Danny, who runs our production team back there, he's more than happy to help get you connected in the schedule. It's a simple schedule, about an hour and a half a weekend when you serve. We love and need your partnership to make that happen. And we want to help some of the team members who've been doing an incredible job for many, many years. Or you can go online and sign up for that. So if you had a nudge or you feel like maybe that's an opportunity, stop by after the service and connect with Danny. We would love to have you partner with us in the setup process, because it takes a village to be able to do this. All right. So today we are in the series called The Biggest Butts in the Bible. If you are newer here, welcome. And Tatiana, our worship director and teaching pastor, is going to be leading us today through this incredible passage that she's going to be able to share about today. But before she does, I'd love it if you'd stand up, welcome somebody around you, and ask them what is the one thing they're doing before summer ends. What is the one thing? All right.
Good morning, everyone. It sounds like we have some good conversations going about what our plans for the rest of summer are. I said to my husband the other day, "Oh, I'd love to go kayaking soon." And he sighed and said, "I'm summered out. I'm ready for winter." Like, excuse me, I have like 3 more lake days planned for us for the rest of summer. But it sounds like we are not summered out. Can I get like a woohoo or something for that? Yeah, we are not summered out here at Kensington, Birmingham. Well, hey, I'm so happy to be here with you all this morning. To those of you here in the room and joining us online, welcome. If I haven't gotten a chance to meet you yet, my name is Tatiana. I'm a worship and teaching pastor here at our Birmingham campus. And as always, I just love to be here with you all. I'm going to invite our team down right now, and as I do, I want to tell you guys a story about something that happened this past week. That Jackson, our student pastor, he would love to talk to you more about this if you see him in the hallway. He's the really tall person, you can't miss him. But our middle school students, they went to the west side of the state this week, and they had mixed camp, and he told me stories about students who had great spiritual conversations with their leaders this week, who brought friends with them, who dove in and had conversations in small groups and opened up about their faith in ways that they hadn't before, and students who made first-time decisions to follow Jesus and pursue a relationship with him, and students that are curious about God and asking great questions. And what's really beautiful is a lot of these students would not have been even able to go to mixed camp in the first place if it wasn't for the scholarship funds set up for them. So that is a direct result of your generosity. So thank you so much for the ways that you are generous to this church, because it enables us to create these spaces for our young people to explore Jesus and discover their faith for the first time. So thank you so much for that. Our team is going to come forward now, and there's ways on the screen as well if you choose to partner with us through giving. We're so grateful for your generosity. But today we are finishing out our very first summer series where we've been looking at these pivotal statements in the Bible where God changes everything with a single word, but. So naturally, like Justin said, we've called this series The Biggest Buts in the Bible. And word on the street is that title has gotten a lot more laughs with our K kids and our middle schoolers than with our adults here in this room. Now, I was born and raised in San Jose, which is also known as the heart of the Silicon Valley. This is where iPhones and Teslas come from, where LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Google have their headquarters. And in the Silicon Valley, when you meet people there, there's a really good chance that they work at one of these tech companies, kind of like how here in Detroit, there's a really good chance that the person you're talking to works in auto somewhere. And today we're going to look at the story of someone who meets Jesus, and I imagine him, if his story was told today, as what is lovingly in the Silicon Valley called a Silicon Valley tech bro. So before we get into his story today, I asked ChatGPT to paint a picture of what this guy would have been like had he been living today in the Silicon Valley, maybe working at Apple or Google, and they painted a very thorough picture of this. I don't know if the algorithm is biased or something, but this is what it said. He wakes up in his ultra-modern, minimalist glass and steel high-rise in downtown San Francisco. He taps his Apple Watch, of course, to turn off the alarm, which then buzzes with notifications from his venture capitalist investors. Then he heads out to his Rivian R1T electric truck, sleek but rugged. It's not a Tesla because he's too cool for that mainstream vibe. The Rivian is a flex that says, "I'm eco-friendly, high-tech, and forward-thinking." It's all about promoting an image, sustainable but not sacrificing luxury. Then he walks into his favorite trendy cafe. It's the type of place where the tech bros gather in the mornings, typing away on their MacBook Pros. The barista already knows his order, a non-dairy oat milk latte. If anyone in the cafe is watching, they know he's part of the in crowd. He scrolls through his LinkedIn feed for a bit, liking posts from fellow entrepreneurs, looking for investment opportunities. He might even post a motivational quote or an update to remind people he's crushing it. And then it just kept going. So I cut it off there. So then I thought, hey, maybe I can ask them, what if they were from Detroit working in auto? And I kid you not, the response was, they're driving a Cadillac and they just went golfing. Now they're at a steakhouse. And And that was it. There's a lot less detail there, and maybe, conspiracy theory here, but maybe it's because ChatGPT's headquarters are in San Francisco, so there's like this bias in the algorithm. But I think it used to be Detroit versus everybody. Now it's Detroit versus ChatGPT now. Am I right? Make the t-shirts. We got to tell ChatGPT to say nice things about Detroit. I'm trying to prove to you that I live here now and I know the lingo. I might be from the Bay Area, but my heart is truly loyal to Detroit now. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So if you're familiar with the passage that we're going to be in today, maybe you've already got some guesses about who ChatGPT was modernizing here. And Mark describes this man as the rich ruler, and then Matthew says that he was a young ruler with a word referring to someone who's under 40 years old. So tradition has called this man the rich young ruler. So if you're just under 40 years old today and you were feeling like maybe you weren't young, there's some really good news for you from the book of Matthew today that you still qualify as young. That he was wealthy, he had many possessions, he was educated, respected, had authority and power, and was young. He would have definitely made Crane's 40 under 40 list. Now the questions he asked Jesus give us a glimpse into this man's inner life. He's not just someone who wants to be rich and powerful, he also deeply desires to be good. He wants to be a person of character and integrity, and 3 of the 4 Gospels tells a version of this man's story. And today, we're going to be looking at Matthew's account. And it's really significant for us to consider who Matthew was and what his perspective would have been witnessing this encounter with Jesus. Now, all 4 gospel accounts have a unique message that they are trying to communicate using the life and words of Jesus. And certain themes are more prominent in some than in others. And Matthew's message is made clear from the opening genealogy, where shocking inclusions are made in Jesus' family history. And it's this: Jesus is good news for the outsider. The kingdom of heaven welcomes the outsiders in. And Matthew knew what it was like to be an outsider. One of my favorite Bible podcasts called Bema Discipleship has a great overview of Matthew's agenda in writing his gospel. And they pointed out that since Matthew was a tax collector, that had to have meant that at some point Matthew sold his soul to the Roman Empire and agenda, thinking that his call within the Jewish narrative was done for. But then Jesus showed up. And he saw him in his tax collector booth, someone who's hated, viewed as a sinner who would have been taxing other disciples like James, John, and Peter. He's the outsider, but Jesus sees him and decides that's who he wants to follow him closely. That's who he wants to be sitting at his feet as a disciple. So Matthew is given this chance to become someone new, and he follows Jesus around and sees the way that Jesus touches the unclean, how he marvels at people's faith who are spiritually ostracized. So Matthew, the outsider, wants to communicate clearly to his readers, with Jesus, this kingdom is open and available to anybody who wants to be a part of it, even someone like me. With Jesus, the outsiders are in now. The first are last, and the last are first. Now, I think it's also important to consider the context of the chapter in which this conversation with the rich young ruler takes place. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 19 today, and we'll read the story in just a moment, but leading up to this encounter where Jesus is asked a question about divorce. And he shocks his listeners by calling out the culture's systemic abandonment of women in these situations of divorce, and then places great value on covenant relationships. So here Jesus gives favor to the powerless, and he sees the unnoticed. And then right after this, when his disciples say, well, maybe we shouldn't get married at all then, Jesus speaks of eunuchs who were socially alienated and excluded from temple worship, and he seems to marvel at their faith and says that they should be accepted. Hey, these people that you've been rejecting, they've got great faith, actually. You should accept them. Perhaps you have something to learn from the faith of the marginalized. Jesus honors the outsider and loves the excluded. And then it gets even wilder because people bring their children to Jesus, and the disciples want to send them away, which would have been totally normal and a typical reaction because children were seen as the least in society. They didn't participate in religious observances, and then only boys 12 and older were able to participate fully. And Jesus says, no, let them come to me. The kingdom actually is for them. The kingdom belongs to them too. So in this new community that is forming around Jesus, he says the reign of God belongs to the children, and our faith should become like theirs, which today I think just looks like laughing a little bit at the biggest butts in the Bible, right? Let's become like children. But here Matthew is showing us that the overlooked, the outsiders, are seen by Jesus and welcomed in. All these people who shouldn't be included are included, who shouldn't be honored are honored, and that is what is leading up to this pivotal conversation. And then it says. It's so important when we see a transitional word like that in our reading of Scripture for us to consider what came before it that is leading up to this moment. And all of this is when this encounter with the Cadillac driving, golf playing, Apple Watch wearing, steakhouse dining auto bro took place. It says, then someone, and because Mark's description of the rich ruler has become tradition to refer to this man, that's how we know someone refers to a man who is rich and powerful. Someone came to him and said, "Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life?" And he said to him, "Why do you ask me about what is good? There is one who is good. If you wish to enter into life, keep the commandments." And he said to him, "Which ones?" And Jesus said, "You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself." The young man said to him, "I've kept all of these. What do I still lack?" Now, I wonder with that last question if the young man could feel it in his soul that keeping the law alone was not enough, that there was still something missing in his soul. And he just wants Jesus to tell him something he doesn't know that can explain the sense of lack that he has. Now, what I love about Mark's account of this story that Matthew's does not include is that when this man asks what he still lacks, Mark says that Jesus looked at him and loved him. Jesus looked at his curiosity and he loved him. Jesus looked at the desire of his heart to do good and be good and he loved him. Jesus looked at his sense of lack and he loved him. Jesus is described often at looking at crowds of people and being moved with compassion. There's good news today that you can come to Jesus with your deepest question, and that reveals the depths of who you are, and Jesus' response would be to look at you and to love you. And then this is what Jesus says. Jesus said to him, "If you wish to be perfect, go, sell your possessions, and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When the young man heard this word, he went away grieving because he had many possessions. The word translated perfect here is teleos, which has this connotation of being complete or whole. So the man verbalized his lack, and Jesus responds with what will bring wholeness. Jesus says, well, if what you're looking for is wholeness, if you want your devotion to God to be wholehearted, here's 4 things you can do. Go, sell, give, and then come follow me. Now, the letting go of possessions is a prominent theme throughout Matthew's gospel. Jesus warns often about storing up treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and says that we're instead supposed to store our treasures in heaven. So in this encounter, Jesus says what that treasure in heaven could look like for this man. That instead of holding on to his earthly possessions, he says, what if you let those go? What if you let those go and trusted in eternal things instead and gave with unhindered generosity to those most in need? And when Jesus says the poor, that word is referring to those who would have had absolute public dependency on charity. So I wonder if when the man answered that he kept the command of loving his neighbor, if he had viewed those dependent on charity, those ritually unclean, perhaps sick or ostracized, the outsiders, as his neighbors, that he was called and commanded by God to love. For the religious leaders of that day, Jesus often was disrupting their expectations of who counted as their neighbor that they were commanded to love. And what's interesting too is Matthew uses the word possessions, which literally means property. So think land, houses, maybe even a lake house or 5, one for each Great Lake. And hey, this is Michigan, so I know that this hits close to home or a second home on Lake Michigan. But this man goes away grieving because he has many properties. He has many. Now, growing up reading this passage, what would typically come to mind for me about what my most prized possessions were that I would not want to sell and give away to those in need were things like my guitar, my violin, my cats. Nobody was offering to buy my cats, but still just wanted to make sure those were safe. But San Jose, where Timmy and I lived, is the second most expensive place to buy a home in the US outside of Manhattan. So unless you're a tech bro at Google or your parents bought a house before 2008, young people in the Bay Area kind of accept that home ownership is probably not going to happen for them. And that's where Timmy and I were at as well. So when we never envisioned ourselves being able to buy our house. So then when we moved here to Michigan and that became a real possibility, it felt like this privilege that we were deeply grateful for. For us, this was something that we never thought would happen, and it felt so extraordinary that we actually celebrate our house purchase day every single year. I think partly it's because it lands on Star Wars Day, and Timmy was going to celebrate that anyways every year. But now, owning a home, I think I do understand this man's dilemma more than what was just at stake to my name was a couple of instruments. What do you mean you would want me to sell my home and give away the money to the poor? Don't you know that I earned this? Don't you know that I worked really, really hard for this? But Jesus said, go, sell, give, and come follow. Hold your possessions loosely, because love for neighbor doesn't look like accumulating more stuff to our name, more wealth. To be wholehearted in your devotion to God and to feel whole in the depths of your soul looks like this dependence on God's provision. Looks like dependence on God's provision and eternal treasures rather than earthly wealth and status. And Jesus' radical challenge here is right in line with the prophetic critiques that we see in the Old Testament from prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah saying things like this to God's people. Ezekiel said, "This was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy." And then Isaiah said, "Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen? To share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? And when you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood." Now, if those words feel uncomfortable right now, imagine how uncomfortable these words felt to the people hearing them that day. That the sin of Sodom was having excess food and then letting the poor and needy among them go hungry. That the kind of fasting, the kind of worship that God really wants and is really looking for is for his people to share their food with the hungry, to shelter the immigrant and refugee, to clothe the naked, to care for each other. And this sounds a lot like Jesus in Matthew 25 saying that when we do this for each other, it's like we're doing it for him. God's commands to his people to care for the needy continue from the Old Testament all the way to Jesus' teaching. So I wonder if the heart of what Jesus was getting at with this guy was about his excess of possessions and his lack of care for the needy. That his possessions and earthly treasures were getting in the way of his ability to love his neighbor and keeping him from wholehearted devotion to God. So then it says he goes away grieving. Perhaps that he would rather have his possessions than inner wholeness. And then Jesus says something even more scandalous to his disciples. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it will be hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." So if Ezekiel and Isaiah's words about wealth felt uncomfortable, Jesus just topped that. And Jesus really had a way of doing that sort of thing often, didn't he? Now, for centuries, there have been many attempts to tame this challenging saying from Jesus. Some claim that camel was a translation error and one letter off would have actually meant rope. So that means you just need the right size needle and the right size rope, and then the whole eye of the needle thing works out just fine. And what I had heard most often growing up was that there was a small gate in Jerusalem called the Needle's Eye. So if a camel needed to walk through, it just needed to unload and get on its knees, and then it would be able to go through. But there's no evidence that that gate actually existed. Now, my favorite is I love what a pastor, Francis Chan, once said, that maybe what Jesus meant is that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Because maybe Jesus just meant what he said, and we're supposed to be a little uncomfortable with it. So let's listen to what his disciples said. When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astounded and said, "Then who can be saved?" Now, their shock is the evidence of how much Jesus was overturning expectations in his kingdom. Because in that day, the wealthy were seen as God's favorites. Their many possessions were the evidence of God's blessing on their life. So if God's favorites can't be saved, who can? And remember, Jesus has already shocked them by welcoming children, by speaking highly of eunuchs, giving favor to the powerless. Matthew's gospel is not only telling us that the outsiders are welcomed in now, but also that the most powerful, the most impressive, the wealthiest are actually spiritually bankrupt and in need of saving too. Now, I got this mental image as I was thinking about this text and about Matthew's agenda for the outsider, that maybe Jesus' kingdom coming to earth is like coming to a place where there's this ladder that people are trying to ascend. And people at the top of the ladder are respected and valued and maybe even seem to be reaching God. But then there's the people on the ground who can't even reach the first rung of that ladder, like children, like sinners, like fishermen. And when Jesus comes to this earth, he's actually on the ground with them, readily accessible right away. So for then those who have already ascended to the top of the ladder of worldly success and wealth and prestige and honor, the invitation for them to Jesus is the same. They're still invited into the kingdom, but they have to take some extra steps getting off of that ladder first, finding their place with the vulnerable. Finding their place perhaps with those that they had hoped to be better than by being at the top. So maybe a better way to say it is that in Jesus' kingdom, yes, there are no more outsiders, but there are also no insiders either. The invitation to the kingdom is open for everybody, and that is good news. And then it says, Jesus looked at them and said, "For mortals it is impossible." And then this is the good news, but with God, all things are possible. And I wonder if Matthew felt Jesus looking right at him when he said this. Because Matthew and the rich young ruler had some things in common, didn't they? Matthew was wealthy. There's a story of him holding a banquet at his house for Jesus with a bunch of tax collectors and other guests. But what they do not have in common is Matthew was despised among the Jewish people and considered a sinner, while the rich ruler seemed to have led a respectable life, keeping the commandments. But Matthew chose to leave everything behind and follow Jesus. With Jesus, Matthew did what was impossible. We see through Matthew's life how all things became possible for him in the Jesus community, and how following Jesus and his way transformed his life. We see that with God, a despised tax collector is accepted. So Matthew, as a Jew, would have been viewed as someone siding with the Roman Empire to betray his own people. Tax collectors were assumed to be dishonest thieves, as collaborating with the oppressor, collecting more than required in order to make a profit for themselves. So maybe Matthew and other tax collectors were viewed a little bit like this. I've got a picture for a mental image. And if you don't know who Saul Goodman is, there's no shortage of other Detroit lawyer billboards that you could bring to mind. We've got a lot of them. There's options. But Saul, he got the job done, didn't he? He made his bag, but his reputation was terrible. And Jesus once told a parable about a Pharisee who thanks God that he's not like that tax collector over there. God, thank you that I'm not like Saul Goodman. And he thanks God that he's a good person. But then Jesus describes the tax collector as being humble in heart before God, as asking God for mercy. And Jesus also saw Matthew sitting at his tax collector booth on the job, in the act. And that's when Jesus says, hey, why don't you come follow me instead and leave that behind? And Matthew accepts this invitation and throws this banquet at his home, invites more tax collectors to join, and Jesus is not ashamed to be seen with them. Jesus is not ashamed of this association. When the Pharisees are scandalized by this scene, saying that Jesus is eating with tax collectors and sinners, which, by the way, eating would have been seen as an intimate act, making Jesus unclean just by this association with them, Jesus says that these are the very people that he's come here for. And then he quotes the prophet Hosea and says what God really wants, what God is really interested in, is mercy. So for you today, if you have felt unloved, if you felt like an outsider, or you're carrying the weight of brokenness in your story, there is nothing impossible with God. The parts of your life and story that you can't imagine finding acceptance and belonging, there is a God who welcomes you with open arms and says that you're exactly who he's here for. And abundant mercy and love are available for you. Because with God, Matthew, the outsider, is welcomed in. With God, the parts of us that feel the most unlovable find redemption, and we are given a place to belong with Jesus, because all things are possible. And then we see, as the story of this Jesus community continues in the early church, that this was a community that shared all things with each other. So with God, Matthew trades greed for open-handedness. Acts chapter 4 describes this new community of Jesus followers who felt that what they owned wasn't their own, so they chose to share everything they had. And even says that there were no needy people among them, because the people who owned land or houses just started selling them of their own accord and bringing that money to the apostles to take care of the people in need among them. Just like this challenge that Jesus gave to the rich young ruler, but now Matthew is an apostle in this community living this vision out. And it's true that only once did Jesus give this specific challenge of selling all of one's possessions to give to the poor, and it didn't seem to be this requirement he gave to everybody to follow him. But isn't it interesting that the early church chose to live that out? Now, for many of us, greed isn't going to show up like a tax collector exploiting other people for profit, but maybe it shows up in the way that we spend our money, how we spend our time, our unwillingness to get uncomfortable and even sacrifice in a way that's going to help our neighbors. And I have a friend who's a part of this community who has given so much of her time and heart recently to advocate for local immigrants at risk of deportation here in Michigan. And some of them are Christian refugees who have fled their country of origin because they were at risk of being harmed. And what she's doing is she's showing up to their court hearings. She's writing letters of support on their behalf. She's praying for them. She's weeping with them and advocating for them to be treated with kindness and dignity. And a couple of weeks ago, she told me about a man who she was going to be accompanying to his court hearing that Monday, who knew that if he was deported, he would be at risk of death. Because he's from a country that is known for persecuting Christians, and that even comes from their own family members sometimes. So part of the reason that he came here was for safety, for his faith to thrive. And a couple days before that Monday, he said to her, "Because Christ lives, I can face Monday." That is beautiful. That is someone who Jesus would look at and marvel at their faith. And there's good news that God did work a miracle to protect this man, and circumstances worked out that his court hearing is now delayed for a full year. So she's working still. She's working on finding him housing because he's unhoused right now, and she's helping him raise money for an attorney. She's praying for him. Now, this willingness that she has to choose compassion and to enter into the story and experience of the most vulnerable among us is a lot like sharing all that she has with her neighbors, like Matthew in the early church did. And it's beautiful to see how she's giving her time, how she's praying and advocating and being a bridge builder in our community. Because when God said to his people through the prophets, you had excess and you did not give, or you saw someone hungry and didn't feed them, my friend here, she is giving. She's seeing needs and she's stepping in with Jesus-driven compassion. She's living a life where we see the evidence of how with God all things are possible. Because God can take our greed, our love of comfort and earthly treasures, and grow in us open-handedness that is motivated by compassion. It's motivated by love for God and our neighbor, because with Jesus transforming our hearts, all things become possible. And this challenge that Jesus gave to the rich ruler would have also been a change of identity. To give all to the needy so freely that he would be becoming poor with them. He invites him to sell all that he has and give, to have nothing left. This is giving up your power, your superiority, to become one with the vulnerable. And I love how this Christian ethicist verbalizes this. Jesus challenged the rich in hopes that they would find their own salvation through solidarity with the poor. And while the righteous young ruler did not, the despised tax collector Zacchaeus did. And the despised tax collector Matthew did too. All things are possible with God. Matthew learned there is a greater eternal treasure worth holding on to, that earthly status and security, that wealth that it just doesn't compare to. And in being willing to leave behind his ways of greed, to let go of his possessions, Matthew's identity found its rightful place. With God, Matthew's identity found its place. Jesus said that it would be very hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. He said that it's like a camel going through the eye of a sewing needle. And in Matthew 4:17, Jesus began to preach that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Jesus taught that this reign of God would be discovered in limitless love, even love of enemy, in mercy, justice, righteousness, the healing of diseases, good news to the poor, dining with sinners, the outcasts being welcomed in. And I can see how perhaps for those with status, maybe some power and comfort, that the idea that the last would be first would be really hard. And I can see how for me, with my status, my own power, my own comfort, my own possessions, it is hard to enter a kingdom where I am asked to give generously to those in need, to love without limits, to extend mercy to my enemies, to associate with and dine with outcasts the same way that Jesus did. And the Apostle Paul said that Jesus, though he was rich for our sake, he became poor. It wasn't just Jesus' teachings that subverted expectations of how the Messiah was going to come and deliver his people. It was also how Jesus showed up and lived his life as a poor, traveling prophet, unafraid to associate with the unimpressive, recruiting tax collectors and fishermen, and ultimately how Jesus chose the way of the cross. And now we get to choose that way too. And it is not easy. It is very hard. And for our human nature, it is impossible. But with God, it is possible for our worth to not be found in what we own, the accomplishments we achieve, earthly treasures or status, but for it to be found in choosing the way of Christ, of laying ourselves down for love for our neighbors, for finding solidarity with the vulnerable, extending the compassion we've received freely. Because with Jesus, the outsiders are welcomed in. All things are possible. Now, a couple weeks ago, I was at Aldi, and if you've never been, you can't get a shopping cart without a quarter, which is really inconvenient most of the time for me. And there was a couple that had just finished putting their groceries in their car, and they asked me if I wanted their cart. So I said, yeah, sure, here's a quarter. And the guy said, no. Someone gave this to us, so I don't want your quarter. I just want you to give it to the next person in need that you see. And it's a little silly, but maybe this Jesus community is supposed to look a little bit like this. that God has given to us so generously that maybe we are supposed to extend that to someone who needs it too. That maybe this kingdom of heaven is a little bit like sharing your Aldi shopping cart with the next person in need instead of trying to get an extra quarter back to pocket. And the team is about to lead us in one of my favorite hymns, and it has this line in it that's so simple, and it says, "My worth is not in what I own, but in the costly wounds of love at the cross." Now, Matthew did what was impossible without God and what the rich young ruler was not ready to do, and he found his worth not in his possessions, not in what he owned, but in the one who, though he was rich, became poor for our sake. And with God, choosing this way of the cross is possible for us too. So as we sing these words in just a moment, let's open our hearts to how Jesus is speaking to us and inviting us to treasure something greater than our earthly possessions and status. Jesus invites us to take the narrow way that is hard to enter, that few find, by finding our identity with the vulnerable like he did, by exchanging greed and comfort for open-handedness and for the evidence of this, but with God, all things are possible reality to be found in the way we live out these values of the kingdom of heaven. So let's pray. Jesus, we thank you that with you, it is possible for our lives to change and for our lives to be marked not by greed, but by trust in you, by open-handedness, by love for our neighbor and for the vulnerable, and for us to move towards others with that compassion that you've moved towards us with. So Jesus, I pray that if our status, our values are misplaced in any way, our identity is misplaced in any way, that you would remind us right now as we listen to these words and sing them that our worth can be found in something greater, and that's in the costly wounds of love at the cross. That you, though you were rich, you became poor for our sake, for us, to welcome us into your kingdom, for us when we are on the outside to be welcomed in with you. So Jesus, thank you. We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Will you stand and sing this with us?
Not in the strength of flesh and bone, but in the costly wounds of love at the cross. My worth is not in skill or name, in win or lose, in pride or shame, but in the blood of Christ that flowed at the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul, and I will trust in him no other. Soul is satisfied in my worth and my unworthiness, my value fixed, my ransom paid at the cross. I rejoice in my Redeemer, greatest treasure, wellspring of my soul. And I will trust in Him, no other. My soul is satisfied in Him alone. My soul is satisfied in Him alone. In You alone. You
You know, there's something. I grew up in here at Kensington as a kid, and we didn't really sing hymns in my childhood. What I've loved is returning back to the richness of some of those beautiful songs. Maybe that was one for you, a tradition that you experienced as a kid or a young adult. For me, it's been this moment of taking in the beauty and the reminder of where, even in that song, where our worthiness comes from. What a great reminder for all of us that at some point we have all felt like outsiders. And if we are reminded of when somebody welcomed us in, invite us to sit at the table, we find ourselves, as I read scripture more and more, as Tatiana shared, I am more and more reminded that I am Matthew the tax collector than anybody else. I'm the one who has greed in my life, who wants to hold on to my comforts and my things. What a great reminder that with God, our identity isn't built on that. With God, our mercy and compassion that flows out from receiving grace. Such a beautiful, beautiful reminder today. Can you thank Tatiana for leading us today? It was incredible. Next week, we're in a series where we're talking about some of the greatest questions, life's biggest questions. And next week is a question that we've all asked. Who am I? And so I'm excited to be able to wrestle with that next week and be able to share a little bit about what is that defines us. How do we discover our identity in a world where we have so many different ways to kind of find ourselves attaching to an identity, just like Tatiana shared, even our possessions being our identity. What starts to unlock that? Excited for that next week. Before you leave today, if you want to hang out with us, we have our welcome lunch. Would love for you to stop by. God bless you. Have a great week, and we will see you back here.